Hello beautiful beings, in today's video we're going to discuss the 5 stages of spiritual awakening and also how you can navigate through your spiritual awakening so you can flow with it, because that's the most important thing, to flow with your soul. So let's get right into it. Hi beautiful beings, I'm Tara Nightingale and I help people awaken to their true selves through life experience, practical tips, and unconditional love. And if you're new to this channel, remember to subscribe and like this video. Hit the like button now. And remember to also hit the notification button so you're notified when new videos come out. On this channel, we focus on you awakening to your true divine self in the way that suits your soul. And doing this with unconditional love. Because you, yourself, are love. And you're worth it. Okay, beautiful beings, I'm getting a little bit carried away. But I just want you to know, I'm going to do this video in 2 parts. So the first part, we're going to talk about the stages of spiritual awakening. And then in the second part, I'm going to give you a few tips on how you can navigate your spiritual awakening journey and what to bear in mind so that you can stay in alignment with yourself and yourself, your true, authentic self's path. Before I get into the stages of awakening, there is something really important I need you to understand. There's a lot of content out there about the spiritual awakening stages. And as you know, I always like to talk about everything is a concept, and you're that powerful that when you believe something is a reality for you, it is going to play out that way. So what I'd like you to also understand though is, in a spiritual awakening, it's something that is being directed by your soul. It's not directed by your ego at all. In actual fact, a large part of your spiritual awakening is to awaken you to the fact that you do have an ego and that you've been living your life through it unconsciously. And once you awaken to your divine nature and the fact that God is within you, your whole world opens up and you realize that actually you're a divine being and your ego is merely a vehicle that is experienced within the greater awareness, within the greater consciousness, within the greater divine that is you. So, what does this mean? This is important to remember, that your soul has its own alarm clock, and it has its own timing, and it has its own way and its own path. You have your way, I have my way. Each and every single person has their path up the mountain, if you want to use an analogy. And there's no right way to spiritually awaken, and that's what's so beautiful about the planet at this moment and the number of people there are, because people are awakening in ways which are just completely unique to them. And I want you to remember this. So these 5 stages of awakening is designed for you to get more or less an idea of where you're at and what can be expected, so that you have an understanding, so that you're prepared, as much as you can be. Remember, conceptual preparation and what's actually going to happen is always going to be different. Knowing something in your head versus actually experiencing it is always going to be different. They're never going to work out the same way. And being able to embrace that understanding is going to make a huge difference for you. So the 2 things that I'm saying is, your awakening may not take the stages that I talk about here. You could start at stage 3 and then go to stage 1 and then go to stage 2. And secondly, there are no specific timelines or time frames for anyone. So the first stage of awakening is what I like to call the alarm clock phase. The reason I like using the alarm clock is, well, number 1, it's an awakening. And number 2, we each choose our alarm clock. Our soul, when it comes to this planet, it knows exactly what's going to make sense for you. for your soul, how your ego is going to respond given the circumstances, beliefs, patterns, everything that you've had in your life. It's going to know exactly what's designed for you. So your alarm clock is going to be designed for you. And what this means is that some of us may have an alarm clock that goes off very rudely, is very sudden, and wakes us up like this. And some of us have a softer, slower, more gentle kind of awakening. But this is the alarm clock going off. And the way this alarm clock tends to go off for most of us is through an external life event happening. The reason for this is because during this time, you're still unconscious. So it's unlikely, unless your soul has chosen it that way, that something subtle and internal is going to make a shift. Usually it's some sort of external event that triggers us to look and question life, to start asking questions about, why did that happen to me? What is going on? And usually the event is an upsetting event. It's either a breakup or a job loss or a career change or a death. Now, these things can also be experienced in a positive way. Let's not limit the possibilities available in the universe. But this external event is one of the main characteristics of the first phase. The second other signifying characteristic of the first phase is a feeling of disharmony with the world and a bubbling of questioning of, what is this about? There has to be more. Why is life this way? So big externalized questions about the world first start. And that is sort of what happens in the first stage. A lot of people aren't even aware during the first stage of their spiritual awakening that they're actually having an awakening. The second phase of a spiritual awakening is what I would call the questioning phase. So in the first phase, you have this big external event happen because your soul is awakening. It comes up, it rises up, and what it does is it opens up your energetic system. And when it opens up your energetic system, you become very sensitive to energies, more than you were ever before, which means any type of energy, because essentially everything is energy. So this could be old energies within the cells, such as memories that have been stored there. It could be trauma, which are also memories that have been stored there. Old thought patterns, belief systems, all stored there. Pain that you haven't dealt with. So all those energies that aren't serving you as an awakened being are starting to surface, and they're rising out from your nervous system. When you do a lot of conscious breathing, scientifically, a lot of our trauma gets stored in our parasympathetic nervous system, and conscious breathing helps activate that system to release the energy and trauma that's stored in that part of the body. And what happens with an awakening is this starts slowly happening. For some of us, it's faster than others, and for some of us, it takes a longer time. But this is what inspires the questioning. And because now all of these things are rising up, and because your energetic center is open and you're more sensitive, you are more sensitive to the energies that are there. And this triggers the questioning. And the questioning can be about yourself, your relationships, your role in your relationships, your role in society, the people around you, your purpose, meaning, life, just in general. They all become questions that you start asking. And a lot of the time people find themselves very lonely in this space because they're asking these major life questions and everyone else seems to be still asleep. The alarm clocks don't seem to have gone off. It's often that people find themselves lonely and isolated and not understood. And this is okay. This is fine. It's you trying to make sense. And a lot of the time what's happening in this stage is that your ego is the one that's trying to make sense. And that is what causes a lot of the uneasiness and anxiety and restlessness that can come with stage 2, the questioning phase. It must also be understood, though, that the questioning phase, dependent on who you are as a person, can also be quite exciting, because now new is entering your life. And dependent on your ego and your experience as a human, you may find that, oh wow, seeing things differently is quite exciting for you. This was the case for me. So I experienced a lot of bliss in this space. But some people don't necessarily experience it that way. That is fine. During the questioning phase, this is when people also start exploring spirituality more. And it takes on lots of forms. Some people start exploring their heart space more and start exploring the energy of love more. I was very drawn to that in the beginning of my awakening, and still am now. Love for me is a very strong part of my awakening. Some people may start investigating more spiritual concepts. So they may start reading, they may start asking even more questions, having conversations with people, want to look up science, want to look up spiritual texts. That's fine too. Others may want to start exploring their spirituality through helping other people and taking actions and being devoted to a community and going and exploring outside of the community. Especially if they found that in their first phase, they were very triggered by what they saw externally and felt that society is largely unfair. So many people who find themselves aligned with that path may find themselves wanting to really take action. And then fourthly, others go very deep into spiritual practice, such as meditation and retreating and being silent and going very internally. Some of us may start exploring all four together. Some of us only two, some of us one, some of us three. Some of us may explore some of the first aspect earlier on in our awakening, and some of us other aspects later on in our awakening. Remember, it's always going to be suited to what's designed for your soul. The third phase of the awakening is what I like to call the pieces phase. And the reason for this is because when you have this initial awakening where your soul pushes up out of you and your energetic centers open and you're more sensitive and you're now questioning and seeing the world differently, and this can be very blissful and exciting, but can also be a little bit frightening. And when you're in this phase and there's a lot of energy running through you, whether that is a very excited, happy, blissful sort of space, or whether it's energy that's being driven a lot by anxiety, and it can go up and down either way. But what happens in the third phase, in the pieces phase, is that things start looking sort of out of place. So when you were questioning, you were looking for answers and excited about what was coming up. But then when the pieces happen, it's almost as though you become a lot more aware of your ego. And the pieces come in where you have to make sense of the universe itself, so putting the pieces of the puzzle together, the pieces of yourself. So if I am not this ego and this person that I thought, who am I? And the reason why the pieces phase for most is hard is because this is where you have to confront your humanness, or what you thought your humanness was, and what you identified with, which is your ego. And the issues that may come with the ego, and the trauma that may come with the ego, and the questions that you asked in stage 2 about why this happened to me, what this happened to, why did this happen? Now emotions and old feelings that may not have been resolved and are still sitting in the body may come up in this phase. So for me, this phase was quite alarming, because I had come out of the questioning phase feeling quite inspired, and I thought, I felt enlightened. I didn't understand why I found myself almost crashing down from the sky, poof, falling to the ground in pieces, having to then make sense of the pieces of myself and the pieces of the world. How was disheartening. It was not frightening, it was disheartening, and I didn't understand what was happening with me. So in the pieces phase, what is happening is you are figuring out where you fit in. how you fit in. You're finding, okay, how do the pieces of the puzzle fit in together? So during this phase, if you felt a high before, you're not really feeling the high that much anymore. And I think what is really characteristic in this phase, given the people that I've spoken to, the people that I've worked with, and also the other research that I've done, is that what happens now is this spiritual awakening is being grounded in the physical, in this planet, in your human form. And this is when you come to terms with your ego. And what's tricky about this, check out my video about the ego. What's tricky about this is because you have, your ego is what you've created. It's your ideas and concepts about who you are. And because you've believed that you're your ego all this time, now you're dissociating from this ego. It's almost as though you're saying, not really goodbye, but you're detaching yourself from a very strong unconscious attachment that you had to something that you believed who you are. You've always been a divine being, but you've just believed that you're this ego, these thoughts, ideas, and concepts of what make you up, which could be your race, your age, your religion, where you're born, what you think about yourself, what other people have said about you, your ideas about money, every sort of concept and belief that you have. That is what your ego is. And because you've believed that you are all these concepts and ideas, you have formed a love relationship with it. But at the same time, there are aspects about this ego that you don't really like and that you hate. So what often happens is you form this attachment with this ego and you're looking through the ego lens, so you can't look at yourself with the unconditional love that God would look at you with, that Source would look at you with, that the universe has for you. No. You just see yourself through this ego lens, and that's what's happening there, putting the pieces together of how to see and perceive yourself clearly, how to put the pieces together of your ego, how your ego makes sense in this world. Does it make sense in the world? What is the ego? And during this phase is when most of the healing happens for people, because then they're realizing their wholeness. And healing, what it is just changing your perception of how you see yourself and how you've seen the world. And this process, I think, from what I can sense, and this process tends to last a little bit longer than the others. For some, maybe not that much. Maybe in their questioning phase, they've gotten a lot of the answers. But this is when you start taking what you've now first been exposed to and what you've experienced and bringing it down and start grounding it and integrating it within your life. This for me was the most beautiful part of my awakening, because it was when I rediscovered aspects of myself that I wanted to ignore. Because when you have a spiritual awakening, if there are things that you haven't yet accepted about yourself and you just want to be like, oh yes, go up into the higher chakras and go up into just being in the spirit, psychic, sort of divine guidance space, you almost want to deny or dismiss what's happened here. But part of the awakening is to realize that there's real beauty in your humanness, that being human, there's nothing wrong with it, and that being human is a gorgeous, wondrous thing, no matter how it's expressed itself. And for you to then realize that and embody that and integrate that is really what the pieces stage of your spiritual awakening is about. Then we get into stage 4 of the awakening. And stage 4 is when you've now grounded a lot more of your awakening. And this is what I like to call the sense stage. This is when you start making sense of things, where what you've questioned, what you've now experienced has become a bit more of a knowing. Because now it's not only conceptual, you're now having an experiential understanding of who you are as a spiritual being. You've seen it in your life, and now you start playing it out. Now you start seeing when you make changes, how things start changing. In this space, you start realizing more of your authentic self, or what your authentic self really means, what's your authentic expression in the universe, less than what is a self as a person, as an ego, and that your ego is actually just a vehicle for exploration on the physical plane, and that you as a divine being have an authentic expression, and you start exploring and discovering what this authentic expression is about. There's a lot of trial and error here, but because you have a greater understanding of how the universe functions, there is less fear, but sometimes fear, about how this plays out. And as you trial and error more and more, you realize actually there's nothing to fear. Part of this space, this fourth stage space, is knowing that the trial and error is the fun of it all, and that is the beautiful journey of your life. It is during this phase where people start discovering their life purpose, their soul purpose, or they make beautiful peace with where they're at and realize that actually it's never been that bad. Some people start teaching spirituality, and others really just start integrating it in their lives. At this stage, stage 4, you've probably got an integrated spiritual practice that you do on a daily basis, and not for any other reason to transcend anything, but because you find that having a spiritual practice is what is needed. And stage 5 is the last stage of your spiritual awakening, which is now when you've completely integrated all your spiritual principles and you've surrendered to life. And now you've moved into the conscious creation stage. This is the stage that I like to call free, because in this stage you discover that you have always been free. It's just your perception that's kept you from feeling not free, and you realize that you are one with the universe. Your idea and understanding of what control is has completely changed. Your idea and understanding of how you fit into everything has also changed, and you have no need to want to control things, and trust that it's your soul that determines how things play out. And this beautiful surrendering into life is what enables you to really enjoy the present and be one with life and be in the now, which is the only time that there is. In this stage, conscious creation, as I said earlier, becomes a lot easier, because now you understand how you work with the universe and how to apply the principles of letting go, of acceptance, of being present, of being within the flow of life. And it is in this phase where your life purpose unfolds a lot more clearly to you, and each step makes beautiful, wonderful, amazing sense, and your life feels as though it's always been in flow and it's always been like this, and you start seeing how all the experiences you've had have always led you to that specific point. You've learned how to integrate yourself as a divine, beautiful being. Having a human experience actually works, and that your spiritual awakening was designed for you to understand that you can completely live in bliss no matter what the circumstances are. And that doesn't mean that life doesn't come with its challenges, but the challenges are there to help you expand even more, and to enjoy the physicality of humanness even more, and to enjoy the subtle, beautiful energies of what it means to be a divine soul and a divine being. Yes, it's lovely. There's just this beautiful savoring of life, and not trying to dictate and label how life should be, and just allowing life to be. And it is when you are in this space that you make the greatest impact, because then you are one with life. Number 1. Acceptance. Acceptance means allowing. So practice allowing in your journey. You're having a bad experience, instead of going, oh, I can't stand it, why is this happening to me? Just going, okay, this is a bad experience, it's happening. Just allow it to be in your experience. So the truth of this is, when you go through your spiritual awakening, especially if you had a very blissful awakening, it may be, oh my word, I want to stay like this, and it doesn't stay like that. Every experience is temporary, whether it's positive or negative. There are ups and downs, and that is the most important thing that you need to realize. Conversely, if you're having a difficult, maybe harder awakening in terms of negative emotions, that will pass too. Do not give up on your awakening just because it is difficult. It is during the times when things are really tough, you're being shown things that you need to maybe accept and let go of and release. You don't have to attach yourselves to them. Accepting already means you're going, okay, this is life. And when you do that, you allow whatever is happening to be the energy that it needs to be and be the temporary experience that it needs to be, and eventually move on so that you can allow the new energy into your life. The second thing that you can really start doing is don't set timelines for yourself. Now, the ego, especially in the beginning of your awakening, is going to want to be like, okay, this is going to happen by then, and that's going to happen by then, and this is going to happen. And when you do that, what you're doing is you're setting boundaries, you're setting limitations of how your life is to unfold. Now, this doesn't mean that you shouldn't have goals or that sort of thing, but don't get too attached to the way boundaries and timelines and that sort of thing looks, because life itself is more expansive than you can imagine, and so is your awakening. And you are life itself. You are love. You are unconditional love. And you trying to squish that into something and make it into something isn't going to serve you. Allow yourself to expand. This can be scary at times, which is why you must practice acceptance, but don't try and squash it, because it is when you allow things to be expansive that you really grow and you really see what needs to be shown to you. And remember, your soul knows you, so it's not going to put you in an experience that you cannot handle, even though your ego may tell you that you can't. The third thing you must do, and this is very important, is to start to learn to detach from the mind. So in the beginning of my spiritual awakening, I was very egotistical, and my ego was like, I don't need to do any mind work. I don't need to detach from my mind. And I was just going like, oh, everything feels lovely. It's all love. But I was listening to my ego quite a bit, and your ego exists in your mind. Check out my ego video. It will explain it a little bit more. And detaching from the mind is going to help you to find that space that leads you to your divine self, your higher self, your true self, your source, your godly nature. And what can happen during your awakening is, because there are so many changes happening both internally and externally on many very energetic levels, and sometimes even in different dimensions, you're going to feel this. Your energetic center is way more open. You're a lot more sensitive to it. So your mind is going to start telling you things to try and get you back. And it may even be scary, very intimate things that will try and pull you back into unconsciousness, into sleeping. And when you can detach from the mind, you can really start seeing that, hey, I'm not my mind. These thoughts are not mine. So very important to detach from the mind. And one of the best ways you can do this is through meditation. In actual fact, I will say it is the best way to detach. The fourth thing you must do during your spiritual awakening is find a grounding practice. And what I mean by grounding yourself is literally find some way where you can connect to the earth and being here and being present. How this works is you can do it through certain meditation techniques, but what a lot of people tend to do, and when you meditate and go into your awareness, that will help ground you. But what you can do as well is set some time aside to walk on the earth, feel the earth beneath your feet, to lie outside, be outside in nature and lie with your back on the ground, with your belly on the ground, and feel yourself energetically connecting to Mother Earth. This really helps you stay present and centered in where you are. Another thing you can do is learn to harness your intuition. So in the beginning, this is going to be hard because there's so much questioning, so many things going on. But what I want you to do is start practicing centering yourself in your heart. And this is different to feelings, because your emotions, different to emotions, and this is different to emotions because your emotions can be found in different parts of your body. But coming from your heart space, where your truest part exists, where the part of you when you were in your mommy's womb was busy developing, the original expression of you was developing. And how you can start doing this is by literally sitting with your hand on your heart and forming a relationship with it and getting to know it, getting to know how it beats, getting to know how it feels when particular things happen. And then start asking it questions and feeling how it responds. Let me know in the comment section if you want me to go into a little bit deeper tutorial on how to do this. But simply put, putting your hand on your heart and saying something that you know is true, like, my name is Tara Nightingale. And feel how that feels. And then saying something that you know is not true at all. I own a big factory in Wisconsin. And feeling how you respond to that situation. You and your heart, how it works is going to be very unique to you. So you have to develop that relationship with it. And when you start listening more to your heart, you start listening to your true calling, to your soul's calling. And this is going to give you a lot of guidance and be a great tool that you can use throughout your spiritual awakening when you have questions. So beautiful beings, I really enjoyed making this video for you, and I hope it's given you some insight into where you're at with your spiritual awakening journey. And I hope it's shifted you in some way, inspired you in some way, made you see things a little bit more clearly. And remember, your journey doesn't have to follow any of these patterns that I've mentioned. And it could be that you have 1 or 2 stages mixed together, or that your stages don't even take the order of the stages that I have mentioned. That is completely fine too. Remember, you are loved. You are divine, you are beautiful, and you are worthy. So beautiful beings, if you haven't yet, remember to hit the like button. And if you're new, I hope you've subscribed already. But if you haven't, now's the time to do so. And remember to hit the notification button too. And thank you for your time, beautiful beings. It's been an exquisite pleasure. And as always, beautiful beings, I wish you love. Bye, beautiful beings.